Welcome back. It's eerie. Today we're going to talk about a story about a coastal shadow. Olivia and I have been looking forward to this beach vacation for a long time. We were tired of the noise of the city and wanted a quiet place to relax, so we chose this secluded beach cottage. There was no one else around, just a quiet stretch of sand and the endless ocean. It was the perfect retreat, a place where all our worries and stress could melt away. When we arrived at the cottage, the sunset cast its golden glow over the beach, and the ocean shimmered like it was sprinkled with fragments of gold. Olivia stood at the edge of the water, breathing in the sea air, a soft smile forming on her lips. Her smile was as warm as the sunlight, easing the tension inside me. I snapped a picture of her with my camera, capturing that moment of joy, and for the first time in a while, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. The first day was perfect. The sky was a brilliant blue, the breeze was gentle, and the waves crashed softly on the shore. Olivia and I walked along the beach, our feet sinking into the cool, damp sand. Her laughter echoed in the wind, and it felt like even the ocean celebrated with her. I couldn't stop taking pictures of her dancing around, of the distant seagulls, and of the peaceful shoreline. Every time the camera clicked, she struck a dramatic pose, pretending to be mysterious, carefree like a child. We spent the whole day at the beach, staying until sunset. The sky turned a deep orange red, and the sea sparkled as if covered in a golden veil. Olivia said the ocean was most beautiful at sunset, and I couldn't agree more. We left 2 sets of footprints in the sand, which slowly disappeared as the waves washed over them. As night fell, the air grew damp and cold. We returned to the cottage, lit a fire, and made a simple dinner, ready to settle in for a quiet night. Outside, the sound of the waves became heavier, louder than during the day. I ate quietly, watching Olivia across the table. Her face was soft in the flickering candlelight, a faint smile still lingering on her lips. "How do you like it here?" Olivia suddenly asked, her gaze drifting toward the ocean outside the window. "It's great, really peaceful," I replied, though a strange unease crept into my mind. Olivia frowned slightly, sensing something. "Ethan, are you worried about something?" "No, just a bit tired," I said, forcing a smile, trying to brush away the strange feeling. After dinner, Olivia suggested we take another walk along the beach. She always loved the sea, especially at night. I wanted to join her, but she asked me to stay in the cottage. She wanted some quiet time alone. I agreed and stayed behind to clean up the kitchen. The dim candlelight cast long shadows as I washed the dishes, my mind wandering back to the joy of the day. My tension eased. But just as I was getting lost in my thoughts, I heard Olivia scream from outside. My heart jumped and I rushed out of the cottage. Olivia stood near the water, pale-faced, pointing at the ocean. "Ethan, look, there's something out there." I followed her gaze. The waves rolled in, but at first I didn't see anything unusual. Yet Olivia's voice trembled with fear, and she wasn't the type to scare easily. I grabbed a flashlight and walked to her side, shining the beam across the water. In the darkness, a vague shadow appeared on the surface. At first I thought it was a trick of the light, maybe seaweed or a rock. But the shadow moved, drifting closer to the shore. My pulse quickened as the flashlight caught its shape, a large, dark figure, almost humanoid in form. We both froze, staring as the thing rose from the water. It was covered in black, slimy seaweed, and its head was indistinct, save for 2 deep, hollow voids that might have been eyes. It stood motionless, blending into the night, but its silent presence felt threatening. The wind turned icy and I heard a low sound, almost like a whisper carried by the waves. Olivia grabbed my hand, her fingers cold and her voice shook. "Ethan, we have to go. We can't stay here." My mind was a whirlwind, but my body reacted instinctively, pulling her toward the cottage. We ran back, slamming the door behind us. I was breathless, my hands shaking as I listened to the heavy crashing of the waves outside. It sounded like a rhythmic pounding, a strange summons from the sea. We stood behind the door, barely daring to breathe. Outside, the footsteps grew faint, but they were unmistakably there, approaching in the darkness. The tension in the air was suffocating, and I felt the weight of an unseen force pressing down on us. "What do you think it is?" Olivia asked in a hushed voice, her fear evident. "I don't know," I replied, trying to sound calm. "Maybe some kind of animal from the ocean." "But it didn't feel like an animal." Olivia's voice wavered. "We should call the police." "It's too dangerous to go out now," I insisted, though doubt gnawed at me. Outside, the thing in the dark was waiting for us to make a mistake. Suddenly, a soft knock came at the door. Once, twice. The knocks were rhythmic, almost deliberate. My heart raced. I knew whatever was outside wasn't human. The knocking grew louder and faster, as if urging us to open the door. I didn't dare move, and Olivia held on to me, pale and trembling. We both knew that opening the door meant facing whatever had come from the sea. Then, just as suddenly, the knocking stopped. The sound of the waves returned, but now they seemed ominous, like a hidden message buried within their rhythm. I unclenched my fists, but I didn't relax. I knew it was still out there, somewhere in the dark, waiting on the beach for us to make a wrong move. The rest of the night passed in silence. Neither of us spoke. We curled up in bed, listening to the sea's steady, whispering breath. In my mind, I couldn't shake the image of the shadow, the hollow eyes and the lurking terror beneath the waves. At first light, we packed our things in haste, eager to leave the beach cottage behind. As we drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The shadow was still there, standing on the shoreline watching us. Back in the city, life seemed to return to normal, but a lingering darkness stayed with us. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that terrible night replay in my mind. Olivia grew quieter, often staring out the window in deep thought, as if she was waiting for something. A week later, Olivia suddenly told me she wanted to return to the beach. I hesitated, a pang of fear gripping my heart, but I eventually agreed. We returned to the cottage, my unease growing with every passing hour. Olivia's determined gaze, though, kept me from turning back. When we stepped onto the beach again, the waves and the soft breeze felt eerily familiar. Nothing had changed. The sand was still smooth and untouched, the sun still warm. But inside we both knew the truth. The shadow and what lay beneath awaited us once more. As we stood at the edge of the beach, I felt a tightening in my chest, as if the very air had thickened with tension. Olivia's hand tightened around mine, but she said nothing. Her gaze remained fixed on the ocean, unwavering, as if waiting for something only she could sense. "I don't think we should be here," I finally said, my voice barely louder than the wind. "It's not safe." Olivia didn't answer right away. She just kept staring out at the horizon, her eyes distant. "I need to understand, Ethan," she whispered. "I need to know if it was real." "It was real," I replied, the memory of the shadowy figure burned into my mind. "That thing we saw, it wasn't human." She turned to me then, her expression unreadable. "But why did it come? What does it want?" I didn't have an answer, but the growing sense of dread gnawing at me told me we shouldn't be there long enough to find out. I glanced at the cottage behind us, its windows reflecting the fading daylight. Everything about the place now felt wrong. What had once been a serene, peaceful getaway had transformed into a place of unknown horror, a trap waiting to be sprung. "We should leave," I said, my voice firmer now. "We don't have to stay here." "Just a little longer, please," she begged, her tone softening. "I can't leave without trying to confront it, to see if it's really there. What if it was just a nightmare?" With a heavy heart, I agreed, but I kept close to her, scanning the waves for any sign of movement. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the shadows deepened and the beach grew colder. The air around us grew thick, and the sound of the waves morphed into a low hum, almost like a chant, calling us closer. I shivered, feeling an overwhelming sense of danger. I tried to pull Olivia back, but she seemed entranced, drawn by an invisible thread toward the water's edge. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw it again, the shadow lurking just beneath the surface. The water rippled, shifting in the growing darkness. My heart raced. The figure was back, watching us with those hollow voids where eyes should be. Olivia, I shouted, panic rising in my chest. We need to go. Now. She turned to me, confusion in her eyes. Ethan, wait. I need to see it. Before I could reach her, she stepped closer to the water, her foot sinking into the wet sand. The waves lapped at her ankles, and I felt a surge of fear gripping my heart. Olivia, please? I yelled, desperate to pull her away from the shadow that loomed beneath the surface. But she didn't move. Instead, she stared into the depths, her expression shifting from curiosity to terror. Ethan, it's coming? In that moment, the water surged, a wave crashing violently against the shore. I lunged forward, grabbing her wrist just as the shadow broke free from the depths, rising to meet her. The dark figure loomed over us, its form shifting, writhing as if it were made of the very shadows cast by the moonlight. My blood ran cold as I felt its presence pressing against us, a weight heavier than the ocean itself. Run? I screamed, pulling Olivia away from the water, my heart pounding in my chest. The shadow reached for us, tendrils of darkness extending like long bony fingers, trying to grasp at our feet. We turned and sprinted back toward the cottage, the sound of the waves crashing behind us like a monstrous roar. I could feel the shadows closing in, wrapping around us as if trying to pull us back into the depths of the sea. Just as we reached the door, I fumbled for the handle, my hands shaking. Olivia was right beside me, breathless and terrified. I slammed the door shut behind us, locking it tight, and we stumbled back into the safety of the cottage. The house was dark, the only light coming from the moon filtering through the windows. I could hear the crashing of the waves outside, but now it felt as if something else lurked within the shadows of the room. Ethan, what was that? Olivia gasped, her face pale with fear. I don't know, I admitted, my voice trembling. But it's not over yet. Suddenly there was a loud crash from outside, the sound of something slamming against the cottage walls. The windows rattled, and I felt the ground tremble beneath our feet. It's trying to get in, I shouted, scrambling to the windows. I peered outside, but all I could see was the darkness of the beach, the waves rising and falling in a frenzy. Ethan, we need to leave. Olivia pleaded, her eyes wide with terror. We can't stay here. But I hesitated. I could feel the shadow still out there, lurking just beyond our sight, waiting for us to make a mistake. We were trapped in a nightmare and I couldn't let it win. We'll wait until dawn, I said, trying to sound brave, though my heart raced with fear. We'll leave first thing in the morning. As the night wore on, we huddled together in the dark, listening to the chaos outside. I couldn't shake the feeling that the shadow was watching us, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Just before dawn, I heard a soft whispering sound, like the tide calling me back to the water. My heart raced as I realized the voice was familiar, echoing the way Olivia had sounded when she first called me to the beach. Ethan, come to the water. I turned to Olivia, but she was asleep, her face peaceful yet pale in the dim light. The voice grew louder, more insistent. I felt a pull, an inexplicable urge to step outside, to confront the shadow once and for all. Without thinking, I stood and quietly made my way to the door. My heart raced as I reached for the handle, my instinct screaming at me to turn back. But the voice beckoned me closer, a siren song leading me toward the water's edge. As I stepped outside, the cold air wrapped around me, and I felt the darkness pressing against my skin. I walked toward the shore, entranced by the sound of the waves whispering my name. The water shimmered under the first light of dawn, casting an otherworldly glow. In the distance, I saw the shadow rising from the depths, the figure solidifying before me. It seemed to take shape, its dark outline reflecting the early morning sun. Ethan, it whispered, its voice echoing in my mind. Join me, join us. I stood frozen, torn between fear and a strange allure. But as I gazed into the shadow's hollow voids, I felt the weight of darkness pressing down on my heart. Olivia, I shouted, breaking free from the trance. I turned back to the cottage, my heart racing as I ran toward her. I couldn't leave her behind. As I reached the door, I looked back one last time, and the shadow lunged at me, a dark wave crashing over the shore. The cold water surrounded me, pulling me down into the depths. But I fought against it, struggling to break free, gasping for air. With every ounce of strength, I clawed my way back to the surface, reaching for the light. Finally, I broke free, stumbling onto the sand, my heart pounding. The sun was rising, casting a golden glow across the beach, but I knew the darkness was still there, lurking just beneath the surface. "Ethan?" Olivia cried, rushing toward me. "What happened?" "I don't know," I gasped, shaken. "But we have to leave. Now." We ran toward the cottage, grabbing our belongings in a frenzy, my heart racing as I glanced back at the water. The shadow lingered just beyond the waves, waiting for us to make a mistake. As we sped away from the beach, I couldn't shake the feeling that the shadow would always be there, lurking in the depths, a reminder of the darkness we had faced together. The ocean whispered behind us, and I knew we could never truly escape what lay beneath.